Hey, ELA peeps, it's me, Mr. Wells again. Nice to see y'all. Glad you could join us. Hey, we're going to be reading a story called Bloody Times. It's actually not really a story. We've talked historical fiction, um, we've talked biographies, we've talked all of that stuff. This is historical writing. Okay, this is just a true essay about what was going on during that time. So it's nonfiction. And we're going to read it. We're going to be filling out the notes. So hopefully you've got your unit notes on A Move Toward Freedom. And we're going to finish those notes today. Now, I'm going to put this video out in multiple parts because this story is kind of long. So this is the first part. You're going to want to watch all of the parts of the video, fill in the notes. And then the last part is going to have the questions that go along with it. And so just want to make sure that you get that done and that everything is completed that way. We're almost here. It's almost Christmas break. We're almost to the end of the semester, and so we need to finish strong. The background up here says Confederate leaders believed that by abandoning their capital in Richmond, they would be able to prolong the Civil War. So this is at the very end of the Civil War. The South is losing, and they abandon their capital, and they think that maybe it can continue. It says, but just a few days after they left Richmond, General Robert E. Lee was forced to surrender to the Union Army. Shortly after, the Civil War ended and President Lincoln was assassinated. Okay, so we'll be talking about this. Bloody Times, the funeral of Abraham Lincoln, and the manhunt for Jefferson Davis. Now, Abraham Lincoln, most of us know, was the 16th president of the United States. He was president during the Civil War. But Jefferson Davis was also president during the Civil War. He was president of the Confederate States of America, and so he was leading the rebels during this time. So you've got these two men, Lincoln and Davis. Let's read about them. In the spring of 1865, the country was divided in two. The Union in the North, led by Abraham Lincoln, fighting to keep the southern states from seceding from the United States. The South, led by its president, Jefferson Davis, believed it had the absolute right to quit the Union in order to preserve its way of life, including the right to own slaves. The bloody Civil War had lasted 4 years and cost 620,000 lives. In April 1865, the war was about to end. In April 1865, as the Civil War drew to a close, two men set out on very different journeys. One, Jefferson Davis, President of the Confederate States of America, was on the run, desperate to save his family, his country, and his cause. The other, Abraham Lincoln, murdered on April 14th, was bound for a different destination, home, the grave, and everlasting glory. Today, everybody knows the name of Abraham Lincoln, but before 1858, when Lincoln ran for the United States Senate and lost the election, very few people had heard of him. Most people of those days would have recognized the name of Jefferson Davis. Many would have predicted Davis, not Lincoln, would become president of the United States someday. Born in 1808, Jefferson Davis went to private schools and studied at university, then moved on to the United States Military Academy at West Point. A fine horseback rider, he looked elegant in the saddle. He served as an officer in the United States Army on the western frontier, and then became a planter or farmer in Mississippi, and was later elected a United States congressman and later a senator. As a colonel in the Mexican-American War, he was wounded in battle and came home a hero. Davis knew many of the powerful leaders of his time, including Presidents Zachary Taylor and Franklin Pierce. He was a polished speech maker with a beautiful speaking voice. Put simply, he was well known, respected, and admired in both the North and the South of the country. What Davis had accomplished was even more remarkable because he was often ill. He was slowly going blind in one eye, and he periodically suffered from malaria, which gave him fevers as well as a painful condition called neuralgia. He and his young wife, Sarah Knox Taylor, contracted malaria shortly after they were married. She succumbed to the disease. More than once he almost died. but his strength and his will to live kept him going. Abraham Lincoln's life started out much different from Jefferson's Davis. Okay, so here what we're going to do is we're going to have a contrast. Okay, we're going to contrast Abraham Lincoln and Jefferson Davis. And a contrast is when two things, the differences are shown between two things. So a contrast, that's in your notes. Contrast is when the differences are shown between two things. Okay? When we compare something, comparing is when we show the similarity between two things. So oftentimes we use the word compare actually to mean either compare or contrast. If I say compare these two, you might say tell me what the similarities and differences are. But compare means to show something's similarities. Contrast means to show its differences. Contrast means to show its differences. So you want to get those definitions in your notes. Abraham Lincoln's life started out much different from Jefferson Davis's. Born in 1809, he had no wealthy relatives to help him start in life. His father was a farmer who could not read or write and who gave Abe an axe at the age of 9 and sent him to split logs into rails for fences. His mother died while Lincoln was still a young boy. When his father remarried, Abe's stepmother, Sarah, took a special interest in Abe. By the time Abe Lincoln grew up, he'd had less than a year of school, but he'd managed to learn to read and write, and he wanted a better life for himself than that of a poor farmer. He tried many different kinds of jobs, piloting a riverboat, surveying, taking careful measurement of land to set up boundaries, keeping a store, working as postmaster. He read books to teach himself law so that he could practice as an attorney. Finally, in 1846, he was elected to the U.S. Congress. He served an unremarkable term, and at the end of 2 years, he left Washington and returned to Illinois in his law office. He was hardworking, well off, and respected by the people who knew him, but not nearly as well known or as widely admired as Jefferson Davis. It may seem that two men could not be more different than Abraham Lincoln and Jefferson Davis, but in fact, they had many things in common. Okay, here's the comparison. We move from contrast, difference, to comparison. Both Davis and Lincoln loved books and reading. Both had children who died young. One of Davis's sons, Samuel, died when he was still a baby, and another, Joseph, died after an accident while Davis was the president of the Confederacy. Lincoln, too, lost one son, Eddie, at a very young age, and another, Willie, his favorite, while he was president of the United States. Both men fell in love young, and both lost the women they loved to illness. When he was 24 years old, Davis fell for Sarah Knox Taylor. Called Knox, she was just 18 and was the daughter of Army General and future President Zachary Taylor. It took Davis 2 years to convince her family to allow her to marry him, but at last he did. Married in June of 1835, just 3 months later, both he and Knox fell ill with malaria, and she died. Davis was devastated. His grief changed him. Afterwards, he was quieter, sterner, a different man. Okay. Now, different words can have different meanings depending on the context of what they are. There are different kinds of definition of words. Okay. There's a denotation. This is in your notes. Denotation is your dictionary definition. So your dictionary definition is a denotation. Okay. Connotation is the feeling or idea associated with the word. The feeling or idea associated with the word. Okay. If you look at, the sentence says, took Davis 2 years to convince her family to allow her to marry him. What does the word convince mean? Well, if you said coax, persuade, pressure, that would be true, okay? But some of those words, they give you a different feeling. If I said he convinced her family, that sounds positive. If I say he pressured the family or he tricked the family, all of a sudden that's a negative connotation. It gives a negative feeling to the word. So denotation is just your dictionary definition, connotation is the idea or feeling that is associated with the word. Married in June of 1835, just 3 months later, both he and Knox fell ill with malaria and she died. Davis was devastated. His grief changed him. Afterward, he was quieter, sterner, a different man. 8 years later, he found someone else to love. He married Verena Howe, the daughter of a wealthy family. For the rest of his life, Davis would depend on Verena's love, advice, and loyalty. They would eventually have 6 children. Only 2 would outlive Jefferson Davis. Lincoln was still a young man when he met and fell in love with Anne Rutledge. Everyone expected them to get married, but before that could happen, Anne became ill and died. Lincoln himself never talked or wrote about Anne after her death, but those who knew him at the time remembered how crushed and miserable he was to lose her. Some even worried that he might kill himself. Abraham Lincoln recovered and eventually married Mary Todd, but their marriage was not as happy as that of Jefferson and Verena. Mary was a woman of shifting moods. Jealous, insulting, rude, selfish, careless with money, she was difficult to live with. By far, the greatest difference between Davis and Lincoln was their view on slavery. Davis, a slave owner, firmly believed that white people were superior to blacks and that slavery was good for black people, who needed and benefited from having masters to rule over them. He also believed that the founding fathers of the United States, the men who had written the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, a number of whom had owned slaves, had intended slavery to be a part of America forever. Lincoln thought slavery was simply wrong, and he believed that the founders hadn't intended it always to exist in the United States. Lincoln was willing to let slavery remain legal in the states where it was already permitted, but he thought that slavery should not be allowed to spread into the new states entering the Union in the American South and Southwest. Every new state to join the country, Lincoln firmly believed, should prohibit slavery. Lincoln explained his views in several famous debates during his campaign for Senate in 1858. The campaign debates between Lincoln and Stephen Douglas brought Lincoln to national attention for the first time. Though he lost the Senate race, his new visibility enabled Lincoln to win the presidential nomination and election in 1860. To the surprise of many, it was Abraham Lincoln who became the president of the United States by winning less than 40% of the popular vote. More people voted for the other 3 candidates running for president than for Lincoln. Okay, we're getting ready to start chapter 1. I will put it on a different video here so we don't get the videos too long. Make sure you like, make sure you hit subscribe, make sure you enable your notifications. I'll see you in a minute when we go to video 2. Talk to you later. Bye.